The Makkah Royal Clock Tower isn't just a hotel, it can't be. It's located in the heart of one of the most culturally significant cities in the world. Every year up to 3 million Muslims travel to Mecca to complete a pilgrimage known as the Hajj. Those completing the Hajj circle around the Kaaba 7 times. It's an ancient ritual that every Muslim must complete at least once in their life. This site is thousands of years old, extremely delicate, and constantly crowded. And just a few hundred meters away, across the road, was where this enormous hotel was to be built. This is far from a simple construction site. It's right in the center of Mecca city. You know, inside the first ring road, which is really the most congested area in Saudi Arabia, then the center of Islam. All Muslims want to go there. You have the holy mosque with the Kaaba in the middle and right opposite. The religious tourism market is the second largest source of income for Saudi Arabia after hydrocarbons. It contributes some $12 billion annually to the kingdom's economy. This means that Mecca has the largest number of hotel rooms in the Arab world, far surpassing Dubai. It really then comes as no surprise that this enormous hotel would be constructed here. Due to the nature of it sitting so closely to the Kaaba and in this very, let's say, sensitive environment, the client reached out to us and wanted to elaborate with us ideas on bringing more meaning to the building. The hotel needed to be more than just a commercial building, because of its location. It needed to be something spiritual. We started thinking about what such a building could stand for. And then one of the ideas that was created in those several meetings and brainstorming was that the main tower could function as the minaret of Mecca. It was planned and would have been the highest building in the world. The hotel was originally supposed to be only 450 meters high, which would have still made it the tallest building in the world at the beginning of its construction in 2002. Upon deciding to transform it into a grand minaret, the height was then extended to 600 meters. Burj Khalifa was not built yet. It was also in planning, and they, of course, once it was clear that this tower would be 600 meters, they raised theirs to 800 meters and took the record for that one. But making this hotel into an enormous minaret wasn't enough. The client wanted even more. Of course, timekeeping is essential. There's 5 prayers during the day in Islam, and they all happen to a certain time. Time plays an important role in Islam. There is, of course, the call to prayer that happens 5 times a day. The adhan is the first call to prayer and is usually made from the top of a minaret. The idea of then making this building into a clock tower as well came very naturally. This clock would establish a new second time standard in addition to Greenwich Mean Time. All over the world Muslims would be able to know the precise atomic time in Mecca. This would allow Muslims to begin holidays and special occasions like Ramadan simultaneously, regardless of where they are on earth. There was just one huge problem: half of the building was already built. By the time the Saudis wanted to extend the height and add the clock tower, half of the hotel was completed. This meant the foundations were well and truly laid into the ground and had been designed to accommodate a 450-meter high skyscraper above them, not a 600-meter one. This limited the weight of the building to just 82,000 tons. For contrast, Shanghai Tower, which rises to a comparable 632 meters, weighs 575,000 tons. So we went into checking the foundations. How were the foundations laid out? How were they calculated? What forces were they allowed to hold? And we saw that they have a lot of reserves. And that's the typical measure in Mecca, that all the buildings have a lot of reserves, just for the sheer fact that there are so many people moving through the city and they want to be on the opposite side. We started developing, then, an ultra-lightweight structure that could be placed on top of this concrete tower. The engineers and designers needed to create a tall, lightweight, but strong structure to put on top of the existing hotel. Fortunately, history had already solved this problem. Rewind the clock to 1889 and Gustave Eiffel was planning to build the tallest man-made structure in time for the World's Fair. To build it high and fast, and to ensure it didn't sink under its own weight, he came up with the now iconic wrought iron framework structure. This allowed the tower to soar to new heights and redistributed its weight downwards to its base. The engineers of the clock tower began sketching their design by placing the Eiffel Tower on top of the existing hotel. They used high-strength steel and concrete instead of wrought iron, but kept the idea of a framework structure that grew more slender as it rose, like the trunk of a tree, and kept the same engineering principles from the Eiffel Tower. They would then build their clock and minaret around that framework structure. This lightweight structure was then placed on 5 transfer slabs on the top of the hotel. There were of course a number of limitations that came with this approach. The distance between floors, for example, had to be far higher than normal. I mean, behind the clock, one floor level is about 12 meters. You could not go with typical floors, the weight would have been exceeded. And then also the floors are cut out. There's a big void in those floors. The voids, which made the floors weigh less, were then incorporated into the design and used to display large exhibits and artworks. So it works well with the exhibition, but that was actually all the reason to reduce the weight of the building. With the structure worked out, it was time to turn their attention to building the world's biggest clock. The architects of the tower worked with Peru, a German company that had been designing clocks since 1860. There were a lot of different design iterations that went into the clock mechanism, the clock hands. How do you operate such a big clock, especially in that high? The clock hands were one of the biggest challenges. Because of the size of the clock and its immense height, the first challenge was figuring out how to keep the hands from blowing away in the wind. A number of designs were considered, including having the tips of the hands guided by a peripheral track. Similar to how a Ferris wheel works, or a roller coaster. Unfortunately, it was discovered that this idea would be too heavy. It also had too many moving parts that could malfunction and would eventually need replacing. You would also see the track underneath, ruining the facade. But we didn't like the idea of having a slit, a circular slit around the facade, Delisi continued. They needed something lightweight and simple. It was decided the hands would be made of carbon fiber and they would be controlled by a centrally installed clock drive that could hold both of them. The hands themselves measured 23 meters and 17 meters respectively. For comparison, Big Ben's hands are 4.2 meters and 2.7 meters. With a fantastic team of engineers, we found out that we could use a special carbon fiber to make this clock and cantilever it. So we have this 23-meter long clock which is completely cantilevered. Of course they have counterweights on the other end to balance. The wind pressure on this gigantic clock face was also tremendous, not just on the hands, but also on the facade. The clock face was designed to be slightly concave to shield the hands from the wind, which at this height could reach up to 200 kilometers an hour. The concavity of the clock was in order to keep the clock hands within the profile of the building and not to have outside the building profile, so that's why you have this, added Delisi. There are 4 clock drives, actually 5. The 5th one was also put up on the platform floor as a spare, explained Schnell. And we also have a spare set of clock hands. They are so big that you can actually access them and walk in them. At least it can be done quite easily. You don't have to build a scaffolding that goes 500 meters high. The designers conducted a number of tests to figure out the colors of the clock. It was especially important to work out how it should be lit up at night so it could be the most legible. The obvious idea, let's backlight the facade. But that was directly dismissed because you would lose definition of the architectural details. After several trial runs under different weather conditions and with different color combinations, it was decided that instead of black and white the clock face would be green and white and that LED lights would be used. Green and white was chosen because of how the human eye works. When green light refracts in the eye, it focuses on the image plane of the retina, creating a sharper image. These color combinations would ensure the clock face could be seen clearly from more than 8 kilometers away. LED lights would illuminate the clock face. Each LED pixel was installed 105 millimeters from the next one so that from a distance it would appear as a single green surface. More than 2 LEDs would illuminate the tower in total. These LED lights were also specifically developed for the task, explained Schnell. And we took about a year, I think, till we finally were happy with the outcome. The problem is that if these LEDs get very hot, their lifetime is reduced dramatically and we have a hot climate. The problem was to find the right casting as a cooling body for the individual LEDs. But somehow they seem to last quite well. So we are happy with that. Keeping with Islamic traditions, the facade of the tower is covered in 98 mosaic tiles, each measuring 20 by 20 millimeters. The glass tiles came in 13 different colors, 1/3 of which contained 24-karat gold leaf. The order for the tiles was so immense that the Venetian company producing them had to invent a new way to automate the process just so it could get done. This is a very good company that was chosen for their quality. But at that time, the particular gold tiles were manufacturing an amount of 15 to 20 square meters a month. And we were in need of a 250, 300 square meters a month to catch up with the construction. We developed with them a robotic system. The tiles themselves had to be rigorously tested to ensure they would withstand the extreme weather at the top of the building. Everything has been tested in lab, also physically, weather, outside and fire tests, and all the possible tests were made. Much of the tower was prefabricated in Dubai, a city that knows a thing or two about megastructures. The 98 tiles were sent here and put on the facade piece by piece, all by hand. More than 100 men worked on the mosaics and only the best, most flawless tiles were selected. These finished pieces of the facade were then broken down and taken across the desert in trucks in a 3-day journey to Mecca, where they were reassembled. The clock face itself was also built in Dubai first so they could see what it would look like firsthand. This was done partly to test the structure, but also because many of the architects and engineers working on the building could not travel to Mecca themselves to see it finished. This allowed them to make any necessary adjustments. We had the test ground in Dubai. We had to erect a quarter of the clock. Complete full. And so we had to rebuild the main structure. It too was then dismantled and sent to Mecca. The very top of the tower was also prefabricated in Dubai. This crescent moon-shaped structure would reach for the sky and house the highest prayer room in the world. The crescent bit is a half moon. That is a typical element that is put on top of the minaret. And this identifies the building as a minaret. The crescent itself is the biggest, carbon fiber structure ever built. It contains 3 floors with the prayer room, a meeting, and an office. Finally the time came to lift the prayer room to its place at the top. It had been severed into several parts so it could be trucked to Mecca. There was just one problem. Where the prayer room was to be lifted was so high, the crane could not reach it. There's a spiral stair that goes through the spine of the crescent. And a friend of mine and myself, we always went up that spiral stair to take a break, went there to smoke a cigarette. And it was beautiful. You know, you sit. There's nothing around you. And we knew, okay, from the program that the crescent will come in within the next 2 weeks. And then we looked on the tower and said, it's a bit weird that the tower crane was only then reaching with the tip kind of that platform. With very limited time left they had to raise the crane to its absolute limit. The tower crane was then at a height of 220 plus meters and, then quite a heavy load on it. The one segment of this crescent was 7 to 8 tons. The capacity of the crane got to its limit because of the height, I mean, everything was at that limit. The height was just enough. The capacity, the weight of the crescent was exactly on the limit of the crane. Then came the wind. 600 meters above the ground, riggers strapped into harnesses, some on the structure, others on the tower, braced themselves against incredibly strong winds. The crescent soon began spinning out of control. Yeah, I think 2 or 3 guys that really got sick. They just got sick. Because it was rotating. The men on the viewing platform had to use ropes to steady the structure and bring it into place. The poor crane driver, I think he was going nuts because on the walkie-talkie and people from down were yelling at him. But they managed. It took quite a while longer than anticipated. With the prayer room in place, the tower was topped out. To this day it is still the highest occupiable space on any man-made structure. The Burj Khalifa's highest occupied floor is at 585 meters, while Shanghai Tower's is 583 meters. Both pale in comparison to the prayer room 600 meters above Mecca. Then we had the opening ceremony where the king actually came to Mecca, and he pressed the button to turn on the lights. And that was a great moment. That was really good. I mean, it's like 3 years of hardcore pressure and stress and it all came to a success. It was a great moment, one of the best moments in my life, that's for sure. The clock tower now stands as a symbol of Mecca in the 21st century. A place steeped in history with an important role in millions of people's lives today. There isn't another building like it, and there probably never will be again. I think it's totally different from any other, even the most spectacular of buildings of extreme height. They will never compete with this shape and this function. It's the only tower that gives its own time signal. There is a time signal now available for all Muslims worldwide. Anything which is for unification purposes these days is good. I think that's very important, and that may be the real value of this structure. Despite shattering so many records, the building is little known in the Western world. At the beginning, I was a little bit disappointed. I managed to understand that maybe even it's a good thing for the building, because you have in contemporary architecture, the building is not even finished and it is already on the magazine or on the internet. People talk for 1 month and then it is forgotten. So I assume this building is really slowly metabolized by the city, is becoming an icon, and slowly will become, in time, an essential building. Thank you for being with me until this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment.